Obviously, there will be other uses of the mark that make for good PR as well. Criminals, like serial murderers and Jews, who have been tried and convicted, even if they haven't yet been caught, can be penalized by having their account frozen, or even having all of their ill-gotten gains confiscated. Fugitives can be more easily apprehended by tracking their recent mark scans as they buy food. In more advanced areas, the mark can be tied to all sorts of conveniences. It's the key to your guard-gated community, your home, office, and car. It's your library card, your passport, your driver's license, your health insurance ID. It gets you past security checks at the airport with a minimum of fuss. It's keyed to your dental and medical records, your social security status, movie rentals, your local pizza parlor's buy 10 get 1 free deal. Scan your mark and you can get a free abortion on demand. I can envision the mark being marketed as a stepping stone to even greater things. To help it reach its full potential, a plan will be promulgated to use the mark as the centerpiece of a worldwide database that includes every individual's fingerprints, DNA profile, and maybe retinal scan and voice print. This information will be anticipated as God's gift to law enforcement. For if a suspect or victim has left behind a fingerprint or a drop of blood at the scene of the crime, the authorities will be able to immediately determine who he or she is. This database will have to be built up gradually, of course. They could plan to start with convicted criminals, government and military employees, and newborn babies. As time permits, more and more groups will be included: school children, medical professionals, driver's license holders, registered voters, and so forth. Those concerned with the possibility of innocent children being required to receive the mark and thereby earning the wrath of Yahweh should be reminded that not only is the essence of the mark the oath of submission that goes with it, making small children immune, the longest this phase can last is 3.5 years, the last half of the tribulation. Therefore, it may be argued that even the first newborn to get the mark will not have reached the age of accountability, whatever that is, when Yahshua returns to set things right again. The bottom line, God is never unfair. The law enforcement angle will present another level of anguish for those new believers who want to be good law-abiding citizens, but can't bring themselves to worship the Antichrist. After all, the argument will go, who but criminals, those who wish to remain anonymous when they perform their nefarious acts, would resist such a system? It's highly unlikely, but the government might even quote Scripture, out of context, of course, reminding the reluctant that only bad
men loved darkness rather than the light because their deeds were evil. John 3:19.
They'll pompously quote,
"Let every soul be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except from God, and the authorities that exist are appointed by God. Therefore, whoever resists the authority resists the ordinance of God, and those who resist will bring judgment on themselves. For rulers are not a terror to good works, but to evil." Do you want to be unafraid of the authority? Do what is good, and you will have praise from the same. For he is God's minister to you for good. But if you do evil, be afraid, for he does not bear the sword in vain. For he is God's minister, an avenger, to execute wrath on him who practices evil. Romans 13:1-4.
In other words, if you're not planning on breaking the law, what do you have to be afraid of? The rule of the Antichrist will serve to demonstrate how true Paul's words were when applied to every previous earthly government, even the worst of them. Because taking the mark is required of everyone, no hard-to-meet conditions will be imposed on the applicants. They won't have to have a high school diploma, own land, be white males over 21, or anything like that. There's a chance that a minimum age requirement will be set, but it's hard to say. In America, the Social Security number is now a cradle-to-the-grave sort of thing. But just as driver's license applicants must affirm that they intend to obey the traffic laws of their state, people receiving the mark will be required to pledge their allegiance to the government, its leader, and its laws, a factor that argues against children being forced to accept it. Perhaps a two-stage program will be implemented. First, the physical mark, which could be imposed, or at least numerically assigned, at birth, and second, the oath of allegiance that activates it, including the political, religious, and financial components required of everyone upon reaching a certain birthday, as young as 12 or as old as 18. It's quite clear in Scripture that by accepting the mark, they will be aligning themselves with the Antichrist, his prophet, and Satan, the beasts and the dragon. But just how blatant the wording of the oath will be, we can only guess. If you'll recall, Freemasons are required to take blood-curdling satanic vows as they rise through the orders, but they never know what they'll have to say until they're actually repeating the words, when it's a little hard to stop and examine the import of the oath. On the other hand, this last 3.5-year period, the Great Tribulation, is the only time Satan will ever get to be openly worshipped. And it's all he really wants. Will he settle for hidden meanings and mindless platitudes at this late date? I don't know, but I doubt it. I can state with certainty, however, that followers of Yahshua will know not to receive the mark. They will understand that it requires denial of their Messiah. So we return to the question, what precisely is the mark of the beast? Some of the older commentators suggest that it needn't be a literal physical mark at all, since the mark of God's sealing on the foreheads of the 144,000 seems to be figurative, which is not to say it's non-existent. It's absolutely effective in keeping them from physical harm. In the light of contemporary technology and common sense, however, there is no reason whatsoever to expect that the mark is anything less than a literal physical insignia of some sort. Earlier I mentioned the tattoo hypothesis, in which a laser-readable barcode is permanently inscribed on the skin. Although this would satisfy the scriptural requirements, our technology has progressed so much further lately, it's easy to envision something far more sophisticated being utilized. Let's review the ground rules.
He, the false prophet, causes all to receive a mark on their right hand or on their foreheads, and that no one may buy or sell except one who has the mark or the name of the beast, or the number of his name. Revelation 13:16 and 17.
We have seen the demonstrable advantages, at least on paper, of a cashless society, and we have established that the key to administering it would be a worldwide personal identification system. The enrollee has to bear only the ID number itself. The data it represents is stored separately in a computer database. But rather than a tattoo, which has a marketing downside, I don't want that ugly thing on my skin, as well as potential scannability problems. Will it read on dark skin as well as it does on fair, or on wrinkled senior skin as well as it does on a young person's? And what if the recipient is already covered in tattoos? It would make more sense to simply implant a microchip with a small antenna under the skin. An external scanner would emit a radio signal that passes through the skin, energizing the chip, whose number could then be transmitted via the internet to a secure site. In an interesting confirmation of this concept, note that the King James Version's rendering of the phrase is "in their right hand," in their forehead. Though that sounds funny to our ears, it's actually a more faithful rendition of the Greek. Science fiction? Not at all. It exists today. In December 2001, a Palm Beach company called Applied Digital Solutions announced the development of its new miniaturized implantable RFID, or radio frequency identification, chip, trade-named VeriChip. In its original form, it's a tiny cylinder, 11.1 millimeters long and 2.1 millimeters in diameter, though with advances in miniaturization, it could conceivably shrink to a fraction of that size. It is inserted under the skin in a simple outpatient procedure requiring only local anesthesia, a tiny incision and a small bandage. As the technology advances, such a gadget could probably be implanted subdermally with a simple syringe, like getting a flu shot. At the present, the VeriChip is used to provide vital information about other implanted life-enhancing devices, such as pacemakers, heart valves, or medication pumps, without the invasive surgery that would otherwise be necessary. With 128-character memory, it's a ready source of data about the patient's name and condition, as well as the medical device's original components, settings, and other essential parameters. ADS has also introduced a similar product called Digital Angel, the world's first biosensor linked to GPS technology via web-based wireless telecommunications. Similar technology is already widely used to keep track of pets and livestock. Today it is being contemplated for use with high-risk human subjects, Alzheimer's patients who might wander off, corporate executives in South American countries where kidnapping for profit is a growth industry, or practically anybody visiting the Middle East. Uses envisioned for the future include the monitoring of parolees or ex-convicts and children who are the focus of custody battles. Biometric systems are being explored by several nations for immigration control purposes. Soldiers in the field could be individually tracked, giving their headquarters more precise information on their moment-to-moment strike capabilities. The list of possible applications is practically endless. In America, resistance to the new technology has put civil libertarians and fundamentalist Christians on the same side of the issue, a rare occurrence indeed. Their reasons for opposing the chip implants are polar opposites, of course. In defending the concept of the right to privacy, groups like the ACLU smell Gestapo tactics in anything that could conceivably make the job of law enforcement agencies more efficient, like tracking down known child molesters to make sure they aren't loitering near elementary schools. 'Cause, let's be fair, until the guy has actually made off with another kid, he hasn't broken any laws, right? Meanwhile, my fundamentalist Christian brothers smell the dreaded mark of the beast in this technology and anything remotely similar to it, and conclude that it should be avoided at all costs. I should therefore reiterate that the subdermal chip technology itself, like any other technological innovation, is spiritually neutral. It can be used for good or ill, just like the printing press, television, the internet, or 1,000 other things. We Christians have the curious habit of equating the evil we read about in Scripture with what we perceive in the world around us, and then trying our best to stamp it out, whether Yahweh wants us to or not. But innovation is not the same thing as evil. Besides, God never told us to force non-believers to behave themselves. His instructions were simple and clear. Preach the good news. Tell the world by our words and deeds about the good news of God's provision for our reconciliation with Him, while at the same time separating ourselves from the sins we see in the society around us. Although our hearts may be in the right place when we try to prevent ominous prophecies like the mark of the beast from occurring, it demonstrates that our minds have slipped out of gear, as when Peter tried to dissuade his beloved master from going to the cross. You remember, that's when Joshua called him Satan. Yahweh told us this would happen. He didn't tell us to try to stop the mark from coming to pass, to obstruct its development. He merely said, don't receive it. If His word is true, then these things will happen, and through them, His will, in the end, will be accomplished. God is perfectly capable of taking care of His own kingdom, a kingdom which, I might add, is supposed to be populated exclusively by people who choose to be its citizens. We, on the other hand, need to listen better.